This is a message from my brain. Stop playing this game. This is a message from my brain. Stop playing this game. This is a message from my brain. Stop playing this game.
Part 11. Hector gets mad. And then I do. Ugh. My head. Sense of time. Okay. So this is kind of a filler chapter. Mostly here because they need to dump some exposition, and give Edward some time to get over killing his waifu. In terms of raw events, there isn't too much to talk about. Basically, Hector gets pissed at Athos and demands explanations, so Athos obliges. However, Nurgle interrupts story time by teleporting hordes of morphs straight into Astia, and so they fight. The boss, Denning, is notable because he's probably the best example of a genuinely unsettling and, dare I say it, eerie enemy in the entire game. His speech pattern is distinctive and memorable, in no small part due to the fact that the main characters aren't making a big fucking deal out of it in dialogue. In fact, Denning is such a good example of showing and not telling that I'm convinced that the developers with the most influence on the story had nothing to do with him, and probably fought against putting him in the game at all. Oh wait, Lynn had to ruin it by describing the army as eerie. Oh well. Anyway, Athos finishes up explaining shit, so now I gotta explain this shit to you. The general outline of what he tells the lords is as follows. Athos and Nurgle met about 500 years ago in the Nevada desert, and they became friends due to their shared quest for knowledge. They discovered a hidden village in the desert with dragons and humans coexisting peacefully. The two of them crafted a barrier and an oasis to help the villagers, then remained there for centuries, studying in the libraries of the dragons. Unfortunately, Nurgle's discovery of techniques relating to quintessence changed him greatly, and he began to abuse his power, draining the quintessence of humans for more of it. After failed attempts to convince him to stop, Athos and the villagers fought Nurgle. This next bit isn't very clear in English because Athos talks of Nurgle being exiled, while saying that they thought they had defeated him, but I'm told that in the Japanese script it's pretty explicit that they intended to kill him, but that he escaped death somehow, and fled to Bern as a result. In Bern, Nurgle conceals his power level and begins to create morphs. By the time Athos notices this, Nurgle has become too strong to take on directly. Somehow Athos knows that Nurgle now has his eyes on obtaining the quintessence of a dragon, so Athos assumed that Nurgle would attack Arcadia next. Athos creates some magical sandstorms to protect Arcadia, then hides in some underground ruins, waiting for Nurgle to randomly walk by. What is he, an antlion larva? Apparently he didn't even plan to kill Nurgle himself, he just wanted to exchange blows and then Nurgle would somehow succumb to the desert, even though the fucker can warp. You call this a plan? Aren't you supposed to be really wise? However, Nurgle never showed up, and this plan failed. Instead, Nurgle summoned Ninian and Nils through the Dragon's Gate, and began to prepare to summon more dragons. Okay, so to begin with, Athos' story is an explicit retcon that does not match with the given history in FE6 at all. In FE6, Sophia states that Athos found her village whilst traveling around alive after the Scouring, but that the village wasn't hidden in Nevada. Athos warned them that they would be discovered if they remained where they were, and so he led them into the desert, to an oasis, where Arcadia was founded. The sandstorms were supposed to have always protected the village, instead of being recently created, and there was no talk of any special barriers protecting the village besides the sandstorms themselves. These may seem like relatively minor changes, but the whole thing seems unnecessary, and leads to some unneeded confusion. Like, how did the villagers all live in this desert without a source of water, before Athos and Nurgle came along, which, I should stress, was at least 500 years after the village would have been founded? Maybe they had some other sources, and the oasis was made purely for convenience, but then there's the whole 500-year stuff. Before I pored over the script properly, I kind of assumed that Nurgle and Athos learned how to live longer from the dragons, as dragons live for a really long time, and this is backed up by the fact that Nils says in chapter 21 that Nurgle uses quintessence to stop himself from aging. But instead, they've already been living well beyond normal human limitations before even finding the village. You could argue that Nurgle may have only been born roughly 500 years after the Scouring, which means he wasn't nearly as old as Athos was when they met, and he extended his life afterwards using quintessence. But that would be wrong, because Nils says explicitly that he and Ninian passed through the gate a millennium ago, at the end of the Scouring. which means they were born at least 1,000 years ago. And that means that Nurgle fucked the dragon mom, Einar, at least 1,000 years ago. So Nurgle was alive during the Scouring, then survived 500 years to meet Athos. Ha! And even if that wasn't the case, Athos says that Nurgle was equal to him in power and knowledge. How could a guy who's like 40 years old at max, compared to this 500-year-old Archsage, who saved the world and can do all sorts of crazy shit? Except when it's inconvenient to the plot. Really, why did the backstory have to be changed this much anyway? Athos could have just founded the village back just after the Scouring, like he stated to in FE6, and then Nurgle could have been one of the many lost travelers who ended up there, where he could have become friends with Athos, and so on and so forth. I get the impression that they didn't even bother to check their own established lore here. And while I'm talking about how this conflicts with FE6, use of Fourblades in the previous chapter also seems to cause a retcon. Sophia tells Roy that Athos hid his divine weapon in Arcadia, but Athos never leaves the party after Bramimond unseals the weapons, so we know he didn't go back to Nevada to retrieve it before he used it. So did Athos have Fourblades this whole time, and was it specially exempt from being sealed as a result? Or was the explanation about the divine weapons bogus? Maybe Athos couldn't do the seal himself? And if he had Fourblades and thinks it'll actually do anything to Nurgle, why didn't he use it on him back at the end of Cog's Destiny? And Sophia can't have meant that Athos hid the weapon away after the events of FE7, since Athos dies in the end of this game. Spoilers. Therefore, he doesn't even have the opportunity to do that. And Sophia should know about this, because she seems to know about what's going on in FE7. After all, she's sitting around inside of some ruins in Victory or Death, and talks to you about coming after Athos. How did she get there anyway? Isn't it really hard to get to the Dread Isle? Did she travel alone? Aren't they supposed to not go outside? How did she know how to get there? How did she know to go there? How did she get back? So many questions. Better yet, that just reminded me that Sophia is yet another character who should have been able to tell Roy about what went on years ago. Next on the list, how did Athos know that Nurgle was after the quintessence of a dragon anyway? I mean, he wasn't hiding, wasn't he? And it seems as if he's only just started to steal it from humans when Athos tried to kill him. And how did he know that Nurgle called Ninian and Nils through the gate? Nils doesn't explain this until Victory or Death. Really, what is the deal with Athos' pseudo-omniscience? It's a pretty inconsistent and confusing thing in itself. Like, before doing this review, I thought Athos could see the future, kinda like Sophia, because he does exactly that at the end of the game, and he has all these ominous lines that make him sound like a fortune teller. Like, once it begins to turn, none can halt the wheel of fate, but as long as there is hope, people continue to try. They do not know the despair that awaits. It will be harder than you can imagine. Great trials await you, as does great despair. You may regret your decision. Will you stay the course, children? You must reach the Shrine of Seals. There, your destiny's doors will open wide for you. These are just from chapter 23. He even has a fucking scrying crystal. You know, a thing that is normally used to see the future. Conclusion, the game makes you think that Athos can see the future, but if that's true, it will open a whole new can of worms. However, after a close examination of the script, I've decided that it makes the most sense if Athos cannot normally see the future. His crystal ball is just for monitoring events around the Libe, so it's more like a surveillance camera that lets him spy on anyone, anywhere. Man, what would I give to have one of those? Anyway, this benefits me because I also don't have to write like 10 more paragraphs about how Athos' clairvoyance makes him look stupider, and his story even more stupider, because believe me, there's already enough as it is. So this whole future sight thing is just stupid and misleading, but not as bad as it looks, if that makes sense. His surveillance ball could serve as a plausible explanation for as to how he knows about Ninil's summoning, but man, can you imagine that? Athos just sitting there in the desert, spying on Nurgle, wondering why the fuck he's down at the Dread Isle, when suddenly, BAM! He summons 2 dragons out of the gate. I bet Athos would have been like, "Geez Louise, I didn't know he could do that." Oh wait, Louise probably hadn't met with Athos yet. However, Athos ain't getting off the hook yet. This doesn't explain how he knew Nurgle's intentions. Although, knowing Nurgle, I guess it's possible that Nurgle walked right up to him at some point and explained his entire plan with an evil cackle. And that's not even getting into the fact that Athos never bothers to tell Lords anything about Ninian and Nils, nor does he try to protect those two from Nurgle, when he should know that they're the key to all this. Like, shouldn't he have suggested them staying with him, hiding in Arcadia or something? You know, or else Nurgle might warp in and kidnap one, like what just happened already. How embarrassing. In fact, speaking of warping, why didn't Athos warp to rescue the Nils at some point? I don't even mean right now, I mean like, way before. He knew they were summoned by Nurgle, and he was keeping an eye on Nurgle, so he should have known where they were, and known that they were important. He knows that they are dragons after all. If his original plan was to lure Nurgle into the desert and somehow beat him that way, Ninian and Nils would have been a good way to actually get Nurgle to come after him too. Honestly, Athos seems to be extremely lax about trying to foil Nurgle's plans in general. He basically sat back and did nothing until the lords arrived, despite knowing where Nurgle was and what he was doing. And even when we know Nurgle is weak and recuperating, he still doesn't do anything. And even then, he didn't exactly help the lords very much. After all, he told them to go to the Shrine of Seals without telling them where it was or how to get there, yet he constantly mentions how time is of the essence. For someone who is so powerful and talks as if he cares a lot about helping, he sure doesn't help a lot. In fact, this kind of inaction is another part of why I used to think that he could see the future, because he knew everything would work out. But like I said, that just introduces more problems than it solves, and it isn't sustained by the script anyway. Now see, Athos is very clearly based on a character from the original Fire Emblem, Gotoh, who himself is based off of the wise old sage fantasy story archetype. Just like Athos, he's an old and powerful magic user that helps the heroes in their quest against the antagonist. And just like Gotoh, Athos is an important connection to another powerful, evil wizard. Neither Athos nor Gotoh get too actively involved until the very end of the game, but unlike Athos, Gotoh has clear motivations for not wanting to. Gotoh holds some degree of disdain for humans, due to the past discrimination against Manichees, but helps them because he was ordered to by Naga. However, he is particularly hesitant to directly aid them against Medius and Garneth, because the last time he helped the human race, it didn't end too well. He founded the nation of Khadin and taught humans how to use magic. To cut a long story short though, this led to Garneth's corruption via the Dark Sphere, which basically set off the chain of events that nearly destroyed Arcanea. So it's understandable that he wants to be a bit more hands-off this time around. This time he's careful to establish if he can trust any would-be saviors, before seriously committing to them. As a result, Gotoh contacts Marth way before the end of his journey, but does not properly join him until all the way at the end, where he says that Marth and allies have made him change his mind about humans. Athos, on the other hand, never says or implies that he is hesitant to help the main lords. In fact, it's Bramimond who has doubts about the humans. Yet Athos still doesn't do as much as he should if he cares about the fate of the world. There is no good reason given by the game as to why Athos isn't helping out Eliwood more often than he is, both in the story and in gameplay. Heck, forget the lords entirely. Athos could have just gone to Bramimond himself way before, convinced Bramimond to unseal Aureola, and to help him take down Nurgle. Bramimond trusts Athos, and Bramimond still has a sense of responsibility towards protecting humanity, so it shouldn't be too hard to win him over. It's almost as if Bramimond and Athos should have just been combined into one character, called Athos. Now that I think about it, Athos sure has a lot in common with Nurgle. Both are super powerful wizards that seem to be able to do whatever they want, but only when the writers say that it's okay. Both characters end up looking really stupid and incompetent as a result. But let's get back to the chapter at hand. After the map is over, Athos says that their only hope of stopping Nurgle is the power of the legendary items, but that there isn't enough time to get them all. So, instead he's going to go back to Bramimond to tell him what happened, so that he can help him out. Which was what he should have done in the first place. And what's this about taking too long? You can warp. Then Eliwood suggests that while Athos does that, he and the others go to the Dragon's Gate while waiting, so that he can do some damage to Nurgle's troops. I think this is kinda dumb, because it seems almost inevitable that there will be a trap of some kind, but whatever, it's a story trope, and I can accept the idea of them wanting to prevent Lycia from suffering more of these morph invasions. Although, there are some serious problems with these stupid invasions anyway, but again, later. Then Athos asks Eliwood and Hector about their legendary weapons. Eliwood couldn't bring himself to use the Randall because the blood of his dragon waifu was probably still on it, and Hector was afraid that Armite would move by itself the way the Randall did. So Athos asks if he can hold on to them for a bit whilst they're going separate ways. And they agree to it. And then Athos emphasizes how important these weapons are for defeating Nurgle. When they're going to the Dread Isle, the place where Nurgle is everyone in this game blind and stupid? This is the millionth time where you could delete a part of FA7's dialogue, and it would have been for the better. Eliwood and Hector could have just been very hesitant on using the weapons, and that would be why they're unable to use them until they're face to face with Nurgle in the final chapter. They didn't need to give him to Athos. God. There's a guidance chapter next where not much of interest happens, but the following scene between Nurgle and Limstella is played at the end of it if you accept this side quest. If you don't, then it plays now, so I'm just gonna cover it now. So Nurgle has Ninian's Dragonstone and infuses it with her quintessence. This apparently means that he can summon dragons whenever he wants. Limstella is like, would you like to win now? But nope. Nurgle gives another bullshit excuse that doesn't make any sense. He claims he lost quintessence from the injuries he sustained fighting Athos. What? That did 5 damage. 5 damage! And you even gloated with your evil laugh about how you didn't take any real damage from it. And now apparently it's so severe that you don't want to summon dragons anymore? You were about to call them before Ninian ran off. And that's not even all of it. There are so many things wrong with this scene, and with Nurgle in general, but much like another mysterious character from before, I need to present the mountain all at once so I can break it down and properly convey to you just how fucking stupid Nurgle is, so we're going to have to wait until Nurgle has played his final cards. Oh, by the way, Uther died, and Byrne did not invade. Nothing important really happens in this chapter. The only things worth mentioning are some of the final elements of Hector's development, but as I'm sure you're aware, I'm really not interested in singing this game's praises. So I'll acknowledge it as an awkward but effective arc overall, and say that for the record, I do like it. It's not amazing, but it's a shiny beacon in the cesspit that is this game's story. I guess Carla's pretty stupid. Can't even kill a base level promoted Barter with an Iron Rune. How embarrassing. She's a complete pain in the ass to recruit, so you'd think she'd be better as a unit. Oh, and Corel cannot talk to her for some reason, even though that's who she's looking for. Which is basically a forced member berry. Member Fur? Member Bartra and Carla? Moving on.